Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 401 Access Denied. I'm Joe Carson, your host, Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO at Thycotic. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm joined with a world-renowned, awesome guest who's coming with me today to have a very important topic. So, Quentin, would you like to give the audience a bit of an introduction about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Joe. I mean, I don't know if I'll live up to all of that, but yes, I'm Quentin Taylor. I look after information security at Canon. Been there for quite a while. I also have a YouTube channel where I do various bits of RFID hacking and various other bits and pieces. And I just been in information security virtually my entire career. And I'm probably one of the youngest of the old guard, if that's actually acceptable to say.
I would agree. We've been around for a long time, and I miss having conversations with you. It's been so long. The pandemic has kept us apart, but on social, I highly recommend the audience to subscribe to your YouTube channel because it is so much fun and educational. I even learn a lot from it. I've got a couple of Proxmarks, which I've bricked a few times. And yourself and Chris has really helped me get them back. So very educational. I'll definitely recommend. And one of the things, I'll let you explain. Give the audience a little bit of understanding of what you actually do on your YouTube channel and what things you share on there, because I think it's really important and very educational.
Yeah, sure. So my YouTube channel has got a bit of drone bits and pieces on there, but mainly it's a lot of RFID. And I've been doing a lot of collaborations with Timur Yusinov at the moment, and I think, and Leanne Galloway was on there as well just over the summer, talking about everything from contactless credit card security. And this all came about actually because I did a video where I said confidently that Card Clash was all that you needed to prevent credit card fraud. And Timur mailed me and said, "Are you absolutely sure?" Which was his very Russian way of saying, "I think you're wrong, and actually I'm quite an expert in this." So I said, "Well, why don't you come on the channel and show me?" And then he did, and I realized just how little I knew about certain aspects of security. And we've done several collaborations since. It's been absolutely awesome.
Fantastic. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, it's always, I think it's really important is that's when we start really learning is when we get those experts in the field to come and help us, really understand about, some of the things that happens in the background. So, and the same for me. I was never into physical security until maybe about 7-8 years ago. And that really got me into looking at Proxmarks and RFID cloners and really getting into the details about how it really works. So your videos and Icemans and all the people out there are fantastic because it really helps educate and really kind of get into the understanding about it. Because I think one of the topics we're going to be talking about in the episode and the main theme is of course around is the state of cybersecurity. And sometimes for me, I always like to think of things in the physical world and do those relations. And I think when I look at things like RFID or physical security and door locks and even padlocks, sometimes it is a really good way to teach and educate what it is like in a digital scenario.
Yeah.
I think those really relate. So, I mean, if you talk about some of the reasons why you would like to focus around the physical security and the door locks and RFID contactless stuff, what do you kind of use that as a basis for teaching and educating on the digital side?
Yeah, because if you can't get the physical stuff right, then all of the cyber controls. I was talking to someone recently at a conference, and he said, "Why is this important?" And I was like, "That's a really good question." It's like, well, the access controls to your data center, how are they controlled? Oh, via RFID. Right. So if I can copy your data center access card, which probably has 24-hour access, I can get directly into your data center and probably past all of the doors in the middle of the night. And there was a yes. I was like, exactly. And that's why this stuff's important. Because with a lot of the software side, we're very much used to saying, what crypto algorithm, what this, what that, what the other. Yet with RFID, people just take the RFID fob or token or plain white card and they go, oh, it's an RFID card. And you say, well, do you know that RFID card is breakable and that one is less breakable? They look identical. And if you don't actually ask what one's what, or how are they all set up? I was doing a physical assessment of a building, and it had an ancient Indala-based system in it. And we were looking at it, and I said, and I looked at the cards, and in Indala cards, the first 4 digits of the serial number on the card is the year of or can be the year of manufacture, depending if you bought the expensive cards. We did. And I looked at it, and I looked around the room, and I said, do you realize that this card was made in 1980, which makes this card physically older than every single person in this room? And it was like, so we're currently dealing with a
Mm.
system that was installed before all of us here were born.
Yeah.
And somehow we would never trust. We would never trust. If you said, "Oh, I've got a web server and it's from 1982 and it's still running," you'd go, "Oh God, that's probably got security by total obsolescence and no one knows how to hack it anymore." But you'd never do that. Whereas in physical
Absolutely.
security, you stick these locks in and they go, "Oh, it'll last 20 years, last 30 years."
Yeah, and that's the thing is that when and that's what we've done a lot of topics and discussions around the things like IoT and critical infrastructure and a lot of those things is that we see systems that's been in for I worked in a lot of maritime and shipping industries and power stations, and time and time again you see this old equipment that's been around for 20, 30 years. I remember watching. I was fortunate enough to watch a satellite decommissioning project. And that, the button that was designed to start decommissioning of that satellite had been designed 30 years ago. and they're just going, well, no one's pushed this button until now, and we hope it works. so sometimes you're sitting on those elements, the basis and foundation of everything can be really old. And do they ever get updated? Anyone ever takes a second look? So my question to you, when we think about, this, I'm always looking to, for example, the Verizon Data Breach Investigations report. I look at a lot of the yearly reports that come out as a bit of a temperature gauge into whether we're improving or getting worse. And some areas I do see improvements, and I do see prioritization changing. I just want to get a kind of a measurement from you. What's the current state of cybersecurity in the industry? I mean, is it something that are we making the right directions? Are we getting better, or is it early for concern? What's your thoughts on the current state?
So it depends upon, when you say what's the current state of the cybersecurity industry, the cybersecurity industry itself is doing very well. More money is being spent. Yeah. And let's be very honest here, and no offense to any incident response companies, but when I see incident response companies with soaring share prices, I worry a lot. Because it's not that I don't want to see them with soaring share prices. I might end up working for one of them at one point in time, and it'd be great to get some good stock options. But my point really is, when we see them soaring stock options and see huge amounts of money being spent on cybersecurity, the cybersecurity industry is doing brilliantly. And that's what worries me. We as an industry forget that we're here to protect everybody else. And I think that a lot of the bits of the cybersecurity industry are so busy in being buried in the cybersecurity industry. Hey, look at this latest breach. Isn't it great? No, it's not great. A breach is never good. Hey, look at this latest vulnerability. We can market that and stick it in our product. No, that's not good. But the industry is doing very well. As humanity, how are we doing with cybersecurity? We're improving dramatically. But the attackers and the attack surface and the dependency is also increasing at a far greater. So we're going up, but we're getting this far greater thing going on. And we're starting to see trickle down in not a good way. We're starting to see, like, trickle down normally is, it gets done the space program and then your pen really good and stuff. Trickle down in cybersecurity is it gets used by one nation state against another nation state, and then the lower end criminals start to use it, and it becomes commoditized. And now that attack that everyone thought, that's really difficult, no one will ever do that, now becomes a commoditized attack. I mean, what we're talking about with RFID earlier on, RFIDs are a great example of something where when we're doing anything to do with RFID, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. People have done amazing work before us to allow us to be able to play with RFID. But there's also criminals who are able to play with contactless credit card data. I mean, literally just behind me, Timo was doing the demonstration of how you stick a credit card with a known PIN code, so a credit card you own, but then intercept the Bluetooth communications between the reader and the PC, and rewrite the credit card number on the fly and the expiry date on the fly to one that you didn't put the PIN number in, and suddenly you actually charge a different credit card, the second one you put in. So the reader does a complete check to make sure that card and that PIN code work, but the transaction is edited midstream to put a different credit card number in. Apparently this is a very valid attack, and people do this all the time for low numbers.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the things that, really getting into the foundation is, when we think about from the, everything's moving to basically low energy, near proximity communications, especially for things like, IoT, for home smart devices.
But if you look at some of the IoT locks, but Andrew Tierney did an awesome analysis where Cyber Gibbons on Twitter, we should always follow.
Yeah,
Cyber.
yep.
He did a great one where he took an IoT lock, a new IoT lock, and he took a standard £6.95 Wix. Other locks are available. Mortis lock, and went through the physical security features, pointing out that the £6.95 lock was far more resilient to drilling, general breaking, a blowtorch, any kind of picking and everything else, than the £180 IoT cyber lock, which was not so good at cybery stuff. But anyway, imagine it was, but it was made out of cast zinc, and you could just put a blowtorch on it until it just dripped off, and then go, oh, I'll just open the lock, or I'll just hit it with a hammer, or I'll do any one of a number of physical attacks. Sorry, please.
No, absolutely. This reminds me. I've done watched a lot of the guys who's doing from the physical security. I just love even the air canister, basically to open up the sensor doors, the sliding doors. Some of the things in the creativity and the simple things basically open doors. I mean, I'm sitting here always next to me. I've got my handy basically RFID cloner as well. I mean, was it something like €10 that you can basically clone most cards from? So those are the things.
Low frequency, low frequency. I did a bit of a competition to find the cheapest RFID cloner I actually possibly could. Sorry, where is it gone? Here it is. The cheapest RFID cloner I could find that worked reliably, and actual fact I thought was really good. It's one of these.
Yep.
£4.20 this cost me. And then when I bought it about a week later, I got an advert on Amazon going £2.80 or whatever. I was like, damn, I wish I'd bought it even cheaper. That thing, for most low frequency stuff, just works. And you know what?
It's fantastic. I mean,
you don't even need to know. You've got two buttons, read and write. You press one, it goes beep. You press it against a tag, press right, boom, done.
So I mean, the tools. It's the one thing is just saying you can get a lot of cheap stuff out there, but there's also a lot of expensive things as well. So that's the thing, is it can be an expensive hobby as well. So, but going back to one of the things you said, I just kind of like to expand a bit on as well, is that you're absolutely right. One that concerns me as well is that when we're looking at the cybersecurity industry as a whole, that budgets are increasing, their companies are becoming more profitable, revenues are increasing. But that is a concern, because it means that companies that basically are needing to respond, they're needing to spend more. They might become incidents are increasing, attacks are increasing, the services are increasing, and I think one of the things that my concern is that we're still doing the same old approaches of reactive to security. We're in the approach that we're basically we're patching yesterday's incidents, yesterday's issues, yesterday's security. We're basically not thinking about how can we future-proof it. How can we get to the point where
we're taking yesterday's architecture and then putting it into tomorrow's vulnerabilities.
Yep, that's exactly, and it's the challenge that we're doing, is that how do we start future-proofing security? And I mean, the good things is at least one area that when I'm looking at the Verizon Data Breach Investigations report, there was indications of certain areas of improvements. There's certain areas that awareness is improving, phishing is down, but of course ransomware is up, which means that basically some things we're getting better at, but other cases we're becoming more impacted from. So what do you think what areas of organizations, what would you think about that areas that organizations can really look at that would be something they can invest in, would get the most improvements in their security risk or posture? What would be the basis of somewhere?
I would say with things like business email compromise, you can spend all your time trying to educate your senior management, and you can spend all your time trying to filter the email, and you know what, they'll still get through. But you could spend a very small amount of time putting the right financial controls in place and the right trust model in place with the finance community, to make sure that one single person getting fooled by an email, which they will get fooled by an email, and this is the fallacy I'll come on to in a second, you could put that in place, and that means that even if the person does get in, they can't transfer a material sum of money. And it's like, actually, that's the best bang for buck right there. You could spend millions on trying to prevent all the emails coming through. You could spend millions on educating and doing awareness movies, and you probably should. Maybe not spend millions, but probably should anyway. But you know what? On that particular one, just spend your time with the finance team and say, actually, how do I stop someone from making a material monetary transfer if they get fooled? Because there was a great story that came up today, I believe, about a load of social media accounts. 4,000 social media accounts were stolen by some hackers, and they were trying to steal mainly YouTube and Instagram accounts. And the way they were doing it was be reaching out to people and saying, hey, we'd like to sponsor you and we'd like to do a collab. Could you install this software and then review it? Now, someone was going, oh, these stupid people installing this software. Oh, and I was replied quite negatively, going, actually, this is the person who is hoping to make YouTube their career, their life. It's going to become their income source. They don't have the ability to be able to say, no, that sounds dodgy. They have to say, you know what? I have to take a risk, because if I don't, I can't. I have to collaborate with people. I have to do these things. And that's the problem, and attackers know that, and they know where your weaknesses is, and in that case, you have to do it. And anyone who thinks that they will not be fooled by a sufficiently well-written phishing email hasn't met a sufficiently well-written phishing email, or hasn't realized they've already clicked on them.
Yep, you're absolutely right. I mean, as security professionals as well, we have to be so diligent on everything that comes in, and they are so authentic looking, so difficult to detect today that the attackers are, they know what we're looking for. They know how to obfuscate it. They know how to disguise it. They know how to make sure that it's something that we want. And it gets very difficult. And you're absolutely right. One of the things I want to kind of hone in on and talk about is that, I completely agree, is that we can't, one of the methods of basically, that's been a priority is, of course, cybersecurity awareness training. And I think it's important. I think it's important to a certain aspect. But what we shouldn't be relying on is turning all of our employees into cybersecurity professionals. That's not going to work. It's not the way to reduce the risk, because ultimately attackers only need one success. They only need one person to click on something or to type something in. So you're absolutely right that we need to start thinking about, well, that shouldn't be my basically dependency. I shouldn't be dependent on all employees becoming cybersecurity professionals and not clicking on something. What we should be looking at, to your point, is how do we make sure that if somebody does click on something, that it limits the
How do we improve resilience?
Yes.
It's like I was having a great conversation with someone a long time ago about children on the internet. And this person was taking a completely different approach, where they said, don't try and block your child from being able to access all dodgy sites, because it will not work at all. Teach them resilience and say, look, you're going to see horrendous stuff. You're going to see this. This is going to happen. And teach them that they have the right level of resilience, so that actual fact, they go, oh, you know what? Look, that wasn't for me.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. It reminds me, anyone who's had kids, the kids are going to put their hand in the stove, but you want to teach them. And, a lot
hopefully
of parents,
not more than once.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. Because what happens is that even plugs in the house, we used to go around putting all of these little, protection, on the sockets that didn't have anything plugged into it. So if kids put their finger into it. And, I was one of those parents who actually went around and did all of those safety things. And we realized, and we did that with our first child.
Yes, but you didn't do it with your second, did you?
No, we didn't do it with the second one.
We were exactly the same here. We had all the corners masked off for our... Sorry, my children, if you do watch this at some point in time, yes. For Ellie, we did everything. And for Emma, it's like, probably not necessary. See, I was a third child. And someone described it thusly. When you're making pizzas at home, when you make your first pizza at home, it's perfectly made with all the right ingredients. When you make your second pizza at home, well, maybe you run out a bit of the sauce and a bit of the cheese, but you kind of make it okay. By the third one, it's just like, I've got a bit of dough. I just may just get this in. I'll make something. Maybe it'll turn okay. And someone said, that's what being a third child is.
The leftover toppings for the pizza. So whatever's remaining. But you're absolutely right. I mean, when I think about it, second child comes along, you're thinking, okay, you start switching to that, rather than being that, buffer of everything and try to protect them from the bad world. But what you do is you try to teach them and educate them into what's right and what's wrong. You teach them how to use the plug and socket, rather than, preventing them from learning. And I think that's really what we need to get into is the learning. And awareness shouldn't be to prevent them from doing something. It should be to learn them, to make sure how they do it, what the least risk, and ultimately where they don't harm themselves, or they don't bring the company down. What we really want to do is make sure as children that teach them how to use a socket. Absolutely, teach them that there's bad things out there, that basically, that they need to be aware, that, just not everything on the internet's real. So we should be teaching them, rather than preventing them from getting to those places. We should make sure that they can make educated decisions about how to make sure it doesn't harm them or impact them. So, absolutely right. What we should be doing is treating all our employees like our second child. So,
yeah, I mean, we need to be teaching our employees about resilience, and that's what we talk to them about. We talk about resilience and say, look, you are going to click on things. Bad things are going to happen. What we try and do is we try and make it so that when these bad things happen, you can react and recover and recognize and move on, because you can't, like, for example, if you're selling things online, you are going to get buying things online as well. You're going to get ripped off. It's going to happen. So you try and make sure that if it does happen, because it's going to happen, it's not the end of your buying or selling career online.
Absolutely. To your point, you talk about the credit card side of things, is that you want to make sure that you have the ability to make sure that that limit's flexible, that you can change that limit to when you need it to be higher, you can increase it, but don't leave it at that amount. Reduce it back down to the amount that you use on a daily basis. So make sure that your risk is dynamic. So your credit card isn't, open to whatever 30,000 euros or whatever, and you leave it at that, but you actually put it down to the limit that you use more frequently, and only increase and decrease it when you want to do those bigger purchases.
And this is a good conversation to have internally. We were having a conversation, which I believe comes out of retail, ALE, annual loss expectancy. And it's interesting that in retail, they have the concept of shrinkage, and people understand that you will get a certain amount of stuff stolen every year. You can't prevent it. And then when you talk to people outside of retail, and you go, so how many incidents are okay in a year? And they go, well, none. And I had a great conversation with someone who was actually working for a 3-letter agency, and we were having an argument about how and we won't go into the politics here, but if it was acceptable for them to monitor everything and acceptable for the kind of like breaches of privacy that they were being accused of at the time. And he turned around and said, so how many major terrorist incidents are okay every year? And I said, 2. And he goes, what? I went, well, you asked for a number. Don't ask for a number and then be surprised. Yes, 0 is a number. I said, I don't think it's 2. I said, but I don't know. I said, but you can't have it as 0. Because to prevent everything from happening, bad stuff is going to happen. I mean, even when you look at your risk profile, you're saying, well, that's a once every 50 years, that's a once every 100 years, that's a once every 5 years. These things happen. And sometimes we try and set ourselves up to go, that must never happen. And that's often where the security industry fails, because we turn around and what do we say? When a company has a major security breach, what's the first thing that gets screamed at by mainly armchair CISOs? Fire the CISO. And I say, really? You'll notice that's mainly armchair CISOs who say fire the CISO rather than actual CISOs who are going, no, I've got a mortgage to pay. I would really like to continue paying that mortgage. But the point here is, if your first response on any security incident is to get rid of the very experience and the muscle memory in that organization, I'm not kind of sure what organization you're trying to build, but I don't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And that's industries where we can change, and we can start to educate our own stakeholders to say, look, bad stuff is probably likely to happen. If you can't, a very good friend of mine, I don't want to mention his name because I'm not sure if he's, I don't know, this is Chatham House rules, said one of his people said to him, have you got enough money? And he goes, well, I've never got enough money, but if you give me a large amount of money, I'll guarantee you that probably nothing will happen. If you give me an even larger amount of money, I'll try and guarantee that even less will happen. And that's the point. You can't prevent everything.
No, you're absolutely right.
Set yourself up for fail.
Our job. So one thing I realized, years ago, I did a pen test on Park Station. It was really interesting because when I learn things from different events, it's what changes me, and that's what's significant. In this particular event, what I realized, I thought to that point in time, I thought my job was about enforcing cybersecurity. That's what I thought my job was. And that was a realization when I had a conversation with this CEO and CFO at the time. And that was when they changed my opinion forever. That was day when basically I tried, me and the CISO were doing a presentation to get more budget. And the CEO and CFO said, great presentation, but you need to show what you're doing is helping the company. How is it making the employee's job better? And that was a realization for me that my job isn't cybersecurity anymore. It may have been to that point, but my job is to actually listen and understand business risk. And this was a fundamental change. And you're absolutely right. We cannot eliminate all risks. We can't
And
prevent
neither
all
should
risks.
you.
So,
And absolutely neither should you try and eliminate all
Yep.
risk, because if you remove all risk, then you'll remove all potential for profit.
yep.
I mean, someone
And-
ever said Unix allows you to do really stupid things so you can do really intelligent things. And if you turned around and said, I am going to pack every employee into this little bubble that they cannot possibly make a mistake, I'll show you, even if you can do that, I'll show you a company that'll wither and die within 5 years.
Absolutely. And this was the thing. Actually, there's been a big conversation. I was doing an interview about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and for me, I was actually a bit upset. The theme for the third week was all about, or fourth week of October was all about cybersecurity first, and I completely disagree with it. I was thinking that that's the wrong approach, because it is not cybersecurity first. It's basically it's people first. It's business first. It's operational success. It's profit. It's the cybersecurity is a supporting element of all of those.
Well, there's
And
lots of different risks, and we like to take
Yeah.
cybersecurity and put it up on its pedestal and forget that if you're in a sales organization, there's like sales risk, there's market risk, there's what's going on.
Yep.
And I would think that I would like my CEO and senior management to be saying that cybersecurity risk is not the biggest risk on their minds at this moment in time.
It's not. It's not. It shouldn't be. I mean, this was a real, and it always goes back to that point where I had that conversation. I realized that my job is all about risk. And the conversation, it was interesting because the conversation with the CFO was one of the most interesting. And ultimately, basically, it made me realize that my job is to reduce the impact of, so you want to understand what is the potential, what is the likeliness of that risk happening? What is the potential impact if it does happen and when it does happen? And how can I reduce the impact? How can I make sure that I can actually, and the CFO at the time was, they're willing to spend a certain amount of percentage of that total risk to reduce it. And that was basically ultimately, and that's where I got a better understanding of what the potential budget was. But actually, it made me realize that cybersecurity is not first. Cybersecurity is a supporting element across all other business functions and services. It's a supporting element. And it's one thing that we use. We use cybersecurity to reduce risk. But it's not first. It's not even potentially second. It's an element. And some of those things might be process. It might be technology. It might be people. It might be even insurance. They might look at different ways to reduce that risk. But cybersecurity is only one component. It's a method and technique of reducing risk and reducing the impact. And that was a big realization for me. And that was for me was, this whole theme of cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is not just 1 month. It's every month of the year. And, we should be practicing it. But it made me realize that, our job is all about risk and reducing that risk where possible.
Giving the C-level members of staff confidence to be able to make the decisions, understanding or knowing that they've got all the information they need to have.
Yep.
So that they can take risk if they want to. And they should be completely logical and healthy to take risk.
Absolutely. And this means that you're also, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I think this is probably one of the areas that businesses really need to think about as part of that risk reduction is resiliency. Is really about, if something does happen, how do you recover and continue, and how do you make sure that is more likely than less likely. So meaning that when I've worked on incidents, and I remember organizations face that. One organization had lost a complete 1 year's worth of their digital data. I've seen individuals. I've had to help advise and consult individuals who their home PC and machine that basically had a huge hard drive connected to it of all their entire 30 years of life, digital life, their baby pictures, family pictures, their educational, their university content, everything sitting on that hard disk, encrypted with no backup. And you're also looking at businesses with that same scenario where their backup strategy was actually protecting against hardware failure or data corruption, and it was online.
And actually, you make a really, really good point. This is why ransomware is so damaging. If you talk to a lot of pure play IT people and look at their business continuity plan, their entire business continuity plan is about natural incident.
Hmm.
It's about a data center fire. It's about a flood. It's
Yep.
about a tape unit falling over. It's about whatever these things are. And it's about the big difference between playing a computer game against bots versus playing against human players. If
Hmm.
a data center is on fire, it burns in a mathematically predictable way. So you've got oxygen, you've got fuel,
Yep.
and this and heat, and this will basically create this triangle, and it will go through in a very predictable way. It doesn't suddenly start a fire in a totally different data center because it sees that you put all your resources
Hmm.
into fixing that one. And that's the big difference, that a lot of the IT people are then unused to dealing with an incident where someone is watching and they are trying to make the worst possible thing happen to you potentially.
Hmm. No, absolutely, and a lot of the instances as well is that they used to be more kind of opportunistic and automated, where now you're getting more people hands on keyboard and they're watching and learning and changing their techniques. They're modifying their attack path in order to get around your response to those basically techniques. So it's
And
getting
you've
more
got
difficult for
segmentation in the
organizations.
market as well. So you've
Hmm.
got initial access brokers who are just basically
Yep,
just getting in and then selling that bit.
specialization.
I mean, I was discussing it with one of our salespeople, and he looked at me and goes, "But that's exactly what we do. As in, we segment the market and we do bits that are profitable, and we let other people take the
Hmm.
opportunity on bits that are less profitable. We don't want to take the or that we don't want to take the risk on." It's like exactly.
Yep. I
It's
mean,
exactly the same
what
model.
was what was really interesting, and I remember doing an incident response in one organization as well, is that when you start doing digital forensics and you start looking through logs, you start finding that actually there's multiple attackers on the network at some point in time.
Mm.
It's just the last one that you found because they're the most destructive. That when you really start looking at the logs and start uncovering. But to your point, is the organized crime and cyber criminals are definitely they're focusing on skills. The crypto creators are no longer trying to deploy the crypto. What they're doing is they're creating affiliate programs and
Yeah, yeah.
making it as a service and giving it to those who will then use and abuse it. And those who are abusing the crypto, they're actually buying the access from access brokers who just specialize in getting the access. And then they don't want to talk to you when they deploy the ransomware. They'll hire a help desk team who will actually communicate with you to negotiate the ransom and actually help you recover the files. So it's this whole basically production line of criminal networks who are getting more specialized and investing in their specialization, where it's getting very difficult for organizations
And as we
to.
found out,
Yeah.
there's also then cybersecurity organizations who allegedly then go to the cyber criminals and go, "How much do you want? Okay, that plus 10% is what we'll charge back to the client."
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
I heard that story as well, and you're going, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that was someone who stepped over a line somewhere."
And you're getting, I mean, insurance companies are taking that into their own hands as well because they're faced with the double scenario into, how do they make sure that they don't lose as much, and they're also, hiring, security and professionals who will communicate with the criminals to try and negotiate a lesser ransom.
And I've also
Um,
heard now that some of the cyber insurance companies
mm,
are now doing their own security assessments to then inform their decisions for what risks they actually want to take, which I'm not surprised at really. But I think what's going to happen is going to be exactly the same
mm,
as happened in the physical market, in that you're going to start to see the cybersecurity defense market being
mhm,
driven by the insurance companies. Like,
yep,
I have a 5 lever mortise lock on the door.
mhm,
I've got another lock on the door. I have an alarm. I have all of these things and security lights. I have all of those things because my insurance company demands it.
yep.
And I think exactly the same thing's going to start to be when the first time we're starting to
Mhm,
see it actually in the questionnaires, but I want to see them where they start saying, if you do not have MFA on
mhm,
all of your admin accounts, we will not insure you. I think they need to start getting down to very prescriptive measures where they say,
yep.
these are a basic couple of things. If you don't do, sorry, you can't get insurance unless you have those things.
And absolutely, and you also need to prove it, and demonstrate that you've got them in place. Because you're absolutely right. When I remember, now, I grew up in Belfast, and so getting my first car was almost impossible to get insurance, and you couldn't get a car unless you had insurance. It was the most difficult thing. So therefore, you had to make sure that one is that you had all the locks and had basically protection. You had locks, nuts in the wheels, so people couldn't steal the wheels, and then you had to have steering wheel locks, and you had to have chains around your steering wheel. You had to have all of those things in place. You had to have a car alarm. You have to have
Well,
proper central locking.
we have a real
Yeah.
example from the car industry, and I don't want to say the
Mhm.
manufacturer. You can Google it, where they had a major problem with what they called a keyless entry theft,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
the insurance companies just chucked the certain models of high-end 4x4 into, like, I don't know, into an uninsurable category, and suddenly the manufacturer decided they could fix this issue
Yep.
because
Absolutely. The relays on
yeah,
the wireless keys. Yeah.
and
So.
because they turned around and they said, "Well, we can't fix this," and then customers said, well, "I can't insure your car, so I can't buy it." And of course,
Yep.
in that market, it was really interesting because, especially on the high end stuff, a lot of people had it on
Mhm.
on finance or PCP, so it was very easy for the consumers to say, "If I can't
Mhm.
insure it, I can't have it.
So
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 I need to go elsewhere." And suddenly,
so
the
question.
insurance
Yeah.
companies got the car manufacturer to fix their problem.
So, a question. I mean, we saw that with the car industry, and it's very
Hmm.
effective. So it has. So, do you mean let's put that into the cybersecurity side, landscape side of things? Is that so? We see, coming in the near future. Let's say governments will require organizations that's providing digital solutions or whatever to have insurance or some regulation. We have got PCI, we've
Yeah,
got
they
Cyber
might. Yeah,
Essentials.
yeah.
So something that's going to kind of that will, one of those regulations, whether it be GDPR, CCPA, Cyber Essentials, that's going to say, okay, for you to get those certifications, you also have to have insurance. And then basically what's going to happen is that fold around that will force organizations that in order to get cyber insurance, they have to have certain X, Y, and Z in
No,
place.
I don't think that's going
So,
to occur in that way. I
mm,
think it'll just be a case of, if you want insurance, then the insurer will insist on certain things. But I don't think that any of the current
mhm.
legislations will force the insurance.
Okay.
I don't.
Maybe in certain industries, maybe in certain areas that
Maybe
could
in
be
certain
potentially,
industries,
yeah.
because can't imagine that demanding that someone pay for
Mm,
insurance, because, like, even car insurance, you don't have to insure your car. You
mhm.
can lodge a bond of money and just essentially just say, "I've got enough money to pay out any claim. I don't need
Yeah.
insurance." By the way, that's not legal advice. Please double check. But I know in this country, at least, you can drive without
Mm,
insurance because essentially you just lodge a ginormous chunk of cash. And I think it's what the
right.
MOD do and people like that, because
Mm,
they can't insure. So they just you can self insure. I don't think anyone's going to force you to insure via a third
mhm,
party. Now, maybe they might turn around and say you'd have to force self insurance.
mhm.
But I think
Yeah,
what's
you
going
have
to
to
happen
cover it
is,
yourself. Yeah, in
yeah, I
Estonia,
think,
you have to have. It's mandatory for insurance to have for the driving roads, public roads. So here you would
are
have
you
to have
sure that self
insurance.
insurance is not possible?
Not
It's
in
rare in
Estonia.
the UK, but it is possible.
Yeah, yeah, not in Estonia. Here, you definitely have you have mandatory road insurance. But what you can do is then you're basically liable then to the damages of third parties and everything else. But you have to have the minimum insurance to drive it on the road. I could go without insurance. I have a car at my country house that is uninsured, but we can only drive it around our field. We can't drive it in public roads. So, but so you get limited to what your usage would be. So maybe there's a potential of that might happen. That there's some. I think it'd be more industry specific. That if you are going to be providing some type of service that might be regulated, that there may ultimately be some type of insurance that would come there.
Mm. I
So.
think what they'll do is they'll make it morally responsible
Mhm,
to have third party insurance to cover certain risks. And I think as the costs
mhm,
go up and up and up and up,
yeah.
obviously with things like um, car insurance for large corporates, self insurance becomes quite attractive, especially with huge companies with large car fleets, because
Mhm,
they know exactly what their annual loss expectancy is
yeah.
going to be. They know exactly what the cost of the premiums are going to be, and when you take the premiums and the premium tax and how much money they could spend out of the last 20 years, they instantaneously go, it's actually cheaper for us to self insure, easy
Yeah.
for us to insure.
And
Whereas with
that's
cyber attacks, I don't think that maths can be done at this moment
yeah.
in time, because let's be
Some
honest,
some
they
companies
don't
are
know what
doing it
the
though. Yeah, some companies are doing what's called as cyber captives. And cyber
right.
captives is exactly to your point, is that what they're basically saying, well, we can't get insurance. It's going to be, costs us or whatever. But what we can do is we can basically take a certain amount of money as a captive and invest that and make money off that. But it's basically set aside for when incidents do happen. I think that's actually what Target had used. They had a cyber captive and several policies as well.
Mm.
when they were attacked. So some large organizations who have that ability to offset it themselves, insuring themselves per se, if they have enough cash to put aside for that, and that is an investment. They will actually use that for gaining investments and profit, but it is there in case they do need to respond to some
But
type
I
of
think people
incident.
are forgetting on the whole cyber insurance. It's not just the
Mhm.
money that you may need; it's also the fast access to services that you
Yep.
may need to have. So you don't need to get that from your insurance company. You could just build up a large portfolio
Hmm.
of companies that you have on retainer that you can call in, and you can manage all of that. But sometimes it's a lot easier and cheaper to actually let somebody else manage
Hmm.
that retainer and portfolio, and that's also the other aspect of what you get from insurance.
Yeah, I sort of completely agree, and we've had guests on the show who specialize in, for example, incident response, and they highly recommend that you do have a retainer because when you have a major incident and several companies are hit at the same time, what happens is resources are become almost unavailable, and that's just where it's making sure you have access to expertise and resources who come in and know what they're doing to help you recover quickly. Because recovering quickly, that's what organizations that's what's costing money if you're delaying your recoverability. The organization I mentioned about the ransomware case, their backup was encrypted, but they were fortunate enough to have a system that was 1 year old that was part of a migration, so hardware migration. And they were fortunate that was still around, and they were able to use that as a baseline to recover. But it took them 2 months to get back, to get back to a state where their actually services were, basically providing the same services they were before the ransom. So you think about that limited services for 2 month period. That's what organizations should be really looking at. That type of indicator. But what if your organization stopped providing your services for 2 months? What's
And
that
what's the
impact on your
revenue
business?
impact? What's the
Exactly.
long-term impact where customers, and this is the point, is if it's a cybersecurity incident, it'll be different to like, for example, like
Hmm.
COVID or the chip shortages like at the moment, because that impacts the entire industry or impacts the entire sector. It's typically not affecting customer A or
Hmm.
whatever. Whereas a cyber attack is affecting probably just you.
Yep.
So your customer can go to the side. You've then got the bottled water
Hmm.
conundrum where the customer can just walk to the next bus person and buy the service from the next person, depending on what industry you're in, of course.
Hmm.
And I think that's where they make them so that makes them so worrying.
Yep. Absolutely. So I want to wrap it up a little bit and kind of get into summarization. So I think one of the things I've got so
Let's end on a
far.
positive note because we've kind of bit of a downer. Let's come back up again.
Let's come back up again. I mean, I do think one is that organizations are becoming more resilient. They are looking at these. They are going through the practices and they're taking that knowledge and making sure that they are becoming not just incident response plans, but incident response ready, and they are investing in the right areas. I think we really need to. I think we need to. One is you're absolutely right. What concerns me is when this incident response companies are doing really well. That's not a good indicator of a measurement of how the threat landscape is happening. But
And I
I
think
do
we've got
see. I
a
mean,
cybersecurity industry
uh,
who is not servicing humanity particularly well in
mhm,
certain respects. I don't want to call out any bad behavior, but we've all seen it
yep.
where we've seen where the industry is essentially eating the IT industry, and certain people are kind of forgetting on what side of the fence that
Mhm,
they're on. When you see the red teamer who's overjoyed because there's a vulnerability that they can use to now break
mhm,
into companies and make lots of money. And you've got to be really careful there because actual fact, yes, you can make lots of money, but you're making lots of money if you should be trying to do yourself out of a job. That's the old joke with a
yep.
cybersecurity person. You should be trying to do yourself out of a job. And I think as an industry, there's a lot of people who are sitting there going, well, actually, how can I prolong this industry?
Yep.
I don't want
You're
to fix the
absolutely right.
problem.
Yeah.
I want to make money off this problem.
Yep.
And
I
there's
mean,
a very subtle line between doing good and prolonging the issue. You're like if you're like the lawyer who could close the
mhm.
case, but is
Quickly, yeah, quickly, but you
acquiescing
want
to
to,
the
yeah.
client's demands. Yeah, you can sue him for an extra 50 million. Yeah, you can do this. Whereas in actual fact, they should be saying, actually, no, just close it down. It's better for everyone if you close it down. But
Mhm.
if you close it down, my revenue stream stops. I'll make a lot more money if you keep on suing these people. And that's the worry that I have in certain
So,
elements of our industry.
yeah. So there was actually, years ago, I remember in actually, when you think about it, it just brought back something in memory in the insurance industry. Where there was discussions around, for example, doing cyber insurance like a P&L. So that you basically as a collective. And the idea is that you would basically pay cyber insurance, and that if you didn't use it, just like you have, like for example, in the car no claims bonus, is that at the end of the year, if you didn't make a claim, you got a little bit of back, and you made money off basically that insurance. So there was an idea several years ago into doing the same on insurance, is that people would actually go into the economy of sharing. We'd all, organizations go together, and we put this money into insurance. And if all of us didn't actually have any claims in the year, because by getting that insurance, you had to have some basis of best practices and controls in place, that was actually a profit. That was actually became a profit stream because that was being invested. But it was also that you might have some of the companies within that portfolio become victim, but it meant that there was enough money in that entire pot to help that company recover. So there was discussions around treating it like that type of scenario, where it actually became a lucrative investment. It wasn't just money that you put in and never seen again. It was actually something that if you didn't have claims and you didn't request help from the insurance company, that you actually get a bonus back every year. So maybe that's a lucrative way.
That would be cyber insurance companies. If you're watching this,
well,
that's what we want.
We want it to be profitable for everybody.
Exactly. We want money back at the end of the year.
So, but I think, absolutely, for me, I think what we're getting away from this and the discussions I'm having is really that, it's all about making sure that it isn't cybersecurity first. And it isn't about making everyone in the front line cybersecurity professionals. It's about helping understand what the risk is and looking where possible to reduce the impact. And I think that's all to your point, making organizations more resilient, being able to recover quick, have access to the expertise resources, and make sure that, one is you don't have to be faced with paying a ransom, that you can recover in a much more efficient and operational manner, that you're not looking at losing your service for 2 months. And what would that potentially, that cost be? And potentially, cyber insurance might be an option to help you offset that risk.
Although, and this might worry people, what happens if paying the ransom is actually cheaper than fixing the security problem?
that becomes, and that's where really ransomware becomes commoditized. Actually, it was
that's when it becomes protection money. Is it cheaper to pay that one that protects you against that one? And then when does the one that you're paying to protect you against all the rest of them actually just become a legitimate security company?
So I remember actually on a panel not long ago, I think it was with Rick Ferguson, and we had the discussion. And ultimately what happened was, at the end, I thought, ultimately what's going to happen is ransomware is going to turn into a subscription service, is that you'll actually pay the ransomware criminals to not attack you and actually getting into that, subscription. Ransomware is a subscription, so that they're actually protecting you and telling you that, this is how we're going to get access.
I wonder actually if Terry Pratchett called it. You've read books by Terry Pratchett with the Thieves Guild. You'll have the ransomware guild that you will simply pay into, and ransomware will be over. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, it's come back to the old mafia protection money. So it is. So, but any final thoughts or any final comments for the audience? What?
Yeah, no. My focus would be focus on cyber hygiene, focus on making the organization resilient, and focus on making the people resilient. And remember, you can't protect against everything, and neither should you try. And don't set yourself up for failure. If you're in cybersecurity industry, have a conversation with your senior leadership so that they understand that you're not godlike. You can't protect against everything, and neither should you. You should be advising them on what risks they could and should take, and bad things are going to happen. And you know what? You'll be standing right next to them to help bring the company back when those things happen.
Absolutely. That is the wisest advice I've ever heard, and spot on. So it's a great way to end. So, Quentin, it's been a pleasure having you on. I'm really looking forward. I definitely recommend the audience do subscribe to Quentin's. What's your YouTube channel name?
Just Quentin Taylor. So if you just search for my name, if you search for RFID hacking, you'll probably find me as well. But I also my Twitter handle's can be somewhere around here as well. My YouTube channel's in that bio.
Yep, we'll make sure it's in the show notes for sure, if it's okay to add them. And I do love when you're in the little man cave. Is always fun to watch. So, and it's been a pleasure. So thank you for having me on the show. It's been a great discussion. There is, some things of, things for improvement in the industry, but definitely some highlights of things that we can prioritize and focus. So it's been awesome. So for the audience, tune in every 2 weeks for the 401 Access Denied. Subscribe, go back and listen to previous episodes. Quentin, it's been fantastic. Look forward to, maybe we'll do one on RFID hacking. Maybe we
That'd
can
be
also
great. Yes.
get Chris on the show as well. So
Oh,
Iceman
superb. Yes.
himself. But thank you, and been awesome. Stay safe. Take care, everyone.